Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go quickly. As Mark had mentioned, I have lots of experience here in Revit and been using it for quite some time. I really enjoy what I do. In this next segment, what we're going to do is ask the audience a couple questions, and I'd like to go ahead and kick that off now. So we have 5 simple little questions. The poll's open. You'll see in your GoToWebinar dialog box a polls. Go ahead and click on that plus sign and you'll open that up, and you'll go ahead and start the polls. And basically the first question is, yeah, there you go. You see the progress. All right. We'll give everyone about 15 more seconds, maybe 20 more seconds to do this poll. And how many years have you been working in Revit? Awesome. Looks like it's split pretty much evenly. Let's go ahead and close the poll and see where we're at. Awesome. So we have about 38%. Everyone seems to be right around 33% less than a year, between 1 and 3, and more than 3 years. Let's go ahead and ask the next poll question. And when working with architects, how do you get those drawings? Do you get them as PDFs, AutoCADs, Revit, SketchUps, or possibly those old-fashioned hand drawings? Let's go ahead and see everyone's responses. Okay. We're almost at 100% votes. Give everyone a couple more seconds to fill in. And okay, that looks about good. Let's go ahead and post those results. And basically it looks like everyone, for the most part, receives either Revit files or AutoCAD files. That's great, and that's what the common industry is looking at right now, is everyone is usually receiving either one of those two. Let's go ahead and go to the next poll. All right. Now let's go ahead and see how everyone answers these, of how you work with architects or engineers. How do you typically work together on a project? In other words, how do you share files? Awesome. Awesome. It looks like everyone is starting to answer, and overall it looks like a good over 50% looks like it's going to be climbing by using FTP, which is great. I'll tell you, that is probably one of the most secure and easier ways. That's more straightforward, that involves larger files, especially emails will limit you. So that's great, FTP. Let's go ahead and close that, and we'll share the results of that. So as you can see, most of everyone uses FTP, which is great. That's perfect. All right, let's look at one more poll here, and then we'll get started. This next one is, which version of Revit are you currently on? Now keep in mind, one of the things that I can tell you is, when you're working in one of these versions of Revit, you have to basically maintain that version throughout the lifetime of the project. Typically, if you're in Revit 2016, you can upgrade to 2017, but you can't go backwards. So if you're working with other team members, the lowest common denominator is usually the one that will end up working. So when we close that, you'll see that about 50% of you are working in Revit 2016, which is great, and about 27% in 2017. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for pulling those questions. All right, let's get right into this. So what I'm going to do today's session, and we have a lot to cover, is basically in the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to go through and basically show everyone the course for Live Lab Learning, the class that I love to teach about using AutoCAD and Revit together to teach interior designers specifically how to work on drawings. And this is the class syllabus here. You'll notice here we cover a lot of topics, and the class is usually a 5-day class and offered from 9 o'clock until 12:30, enabling you to work for the rest of the day. Today's session, I'm going to basically show you a little bit snippets of every one of these little sections. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that always comes to mind when I teach this class is, do we really need to do everything in Revit the first project? And I'm going to say no. You can begin your project work by working in different options. In this case, what kind of background do you have? Do you have an AutoCAD background? If so, or a Revit file, you're going to have, if you're using a Revit file, you're going to have the greatest flexibility on designing. If you're working with Revit files, your drawings will already be well coordinated using those existing Revit projects. Now, if you have AutoCAD files to use as a base, you can simply look at, for example, this AutoCAD background that we've received, and this is actually the file that we look at in our class. So what we start to do is begin to trace over the CAD file. Now this is really, really quick. What we do is we use the line tool, the pick line tool within walls, to import that line work into Revit walls. So on the left-hand side you see the stairwell, and all we did is just use the pick lines. That has to be hands down my most favorite feature in Revit when we're converting CAD files to Revit. And the results are on the right. Next is, what happens if we get a background that's a hand sketch? For example, this PDF over here is sketched in. Well, one of the things that we can do is we can import these into Revit. And all of these things are topics that I specifically go over in the class and showing you how to use. Now, how much do we currently model? The question you have to ask yourself is, what do we need to model? Do we need to visualize it? Do we need to quantify it? And how much information in CAD can be just left as is? And what I call that is either leave it in 2D or 2.5D. There's sometimes the difference between 2D and 3D, and in the middle is 2.5D. And you'll have to take my class to find out what that 2.5D is. An example of this kind of fusion between AutoCAD and Revit and modeling. You'll notice on the outside perimeter of this wall we have the core and shell. The outside is AutoCAD line work. I don't need to draw the outside core and shell, in this case the shell part, because I'm the interior designer. I don't need to be worried or design anything around the curtain wall system on the shell. I'm more interested in the interior. In this case I've gone ahead and left the AutoCAD as is. I've built up the walls around the core by using pick lines. You'll see that right all the way in the bottom left. And then the new walls and furniture are modeled using Revit. And it's really, really quick and easy. Now, the next thing I can also do is take a look at how to do this from a hand sketch. When I do this from a hand sketch, a lot of times what I can do is I can take a hand sketch. In this case, we exported out the Revit to a DWG or a PDF, and a designer came in and hand marked this up. We can then bring that information back into Revit and start to translate that. We can bring it into AutoCAD like we would normally and use fill patterns or hatch patterns. And if we use Revit, we can take it to the next level. Take a look carefully. I'm actually using the actual patterns for carpet and for tile in different areas. The nice thing about this is that I can easily do area calculations that are dynamic and are 100% right on. This also gives me the ability to do a lot more presentations with the actual material and include it in my color board. I got to tell you folks, super, super excited about this class. I love teaching it. When we take this type of information from a CAD file and Revit file, we can basically layer or stack the layer of information. So in one drawing, for those of you who aren't using Revit, you have all of this information or layering of information in one file. We have the CAD background. We can get a gross area calculation. We can look at just the core. We can bring in scans and look at test fits. And then finally the interior layout. So the things that we can derive from that is gross and rentable area calculations based on BOMA, which is wonderful. And it does it right out of the box, does BOMA calculations. We can look at area programs and basically start to look at values that we can place in to do smart computations. And that includes some area analysis in the room schedules. Over here, we have a room schedule that we'll generate in the class that basically we go through and we start to do this square footage calculation for the entire program. And we put in a new parameter of what is the program area requirement for that space. And that's typically something that we get during the process of acquiring the project. We can easily create an area delta and it'll highlight it in red automatically to show you which areas do not meet the minimum square footage. Either they're below or over. So we can find out quite easily and dynamically any of the program areas that bust our program. Presentation graphics. Revit by far has one of the best presentation graphics that allows us to do color schemes and shadows and 3D cutaways, perspectives and walkthroughs, and then something else as well. Some examples of this are, for example, we can do these 3D elevations to generate wall patterns to give different options to clients. We can do 3D presentations of floor plans with colors, and this is really, really nice and easy. We can also look at those in isometric because a lot of times two-dimensional line work just doesn't convey that information. We also have the ability to do sketches. A lot of times clients understand sketches as something that's not hard-lined. These sketches are generated from Revit. The colors are actually just taken and Pantone with a marker. So all the top left and upper top one is done by hand, and the one on the bottom right is 100% Revit right out of the presentation from the camera. You have the ability to create these sketchy lines so you can convey information without really dedicating to a material, to convey the sense of space without marrying to a color or material. Or if you decide to take it to the next level, we can do renderings all within Revit. And you don't have to take it to 3D Studio Max. You can get these type of realistic renderings. We can take a look at the overall building, or we can just take a look at a particular space. This particular 3D view gives us the ability to convey information and a sense of scale to our clients. Now, we can also incorporate these into our color boards. Everyday color boards that we use can now incorporate three-dimensional imagery and real materials like they would traditionally when you do your color boards. Now we can take our color boards to the next level and introduce Revit objects as part of our color boards. And now for something completely different. This is taking it to the next level. You have the ability to render three-dimensional objects. Over here, what we're looking at is a live gallery. I just took a snapshot of different galleries of people's renderings. You have the ability to render to the cloud and then render it as what's called a stereo panoramic. What does that do? It creates an image that has an image like a left and a right. This gives you the ability to put it into a headset. When you create this panoramic on your computer, and by the way, it doesn't really cost you any extra credits to create these 3D panoramics. On your computer, you create this image. You notice the QR code on the bottom left. You can take any smartphone, scan that QR code, and it'll create that 3D image, and then you pop it into some Google goggles or these $30 goggles that I just got on Amazon. Yep, that's a picture of me, and you go, wow. You can take these images, put them into these goggles for only about $30 and basically visualize the space in 3D. It really immerses yourself into the three-dimensional space. This is something that we go over in the class, and I got to tell you, this by far is one of the best presentation tools that you can give to your clients. Next, let's talk about room finish schedules and keys, schedule keys. You have the ability to do smart schedules. For those of you who are working in AutoCAD, you know the tedious process of creating those schedules. You always have to go back and create the polylines and do the square footage, and if something changes, you have to adjust the polylines. In Revit, it does it automatically. You can create these room finish schedules and put in as much or as little information as you want. You can add parameters for assigning more finishes and basically customize this as you like. What this looks like is just like a regular room finish schedule, we can also apply something called a schedule key. What this does, it gives you the ability to quickly add, I call these palettes, to different areas. So for example, a palette A might be everything that is back of house, and those back of house get certain finishes. Then the CEO palette B might get a different type of finish. Every type of palette allows you to just select that style or that key name, and basically it applies it to the entire floor, base, wall, ceiling finish. And it gives you the ability to quickly create these schedules 100% accurately by creating these styles per room. Okay. Talking about finishes. The finishes can be incorporated into system families, so you can share them with other projects. You can also split the finishes on particular objects. You can create floor finishes and do material takeoffs, and lastly, you can actually tag them in a very smart manner. And what this looks like is something like this. On the left-hand side, these are actually two very similar spaces. On the left-hand side, I did something called split face, where I can just paint the surface of the wall. So as an interior designer, I don't necessarily have the luxury sometimes of placing the chipboard wall where I want, but I'm left with the architect's stud and chipboard wall. I can then go after the fact and paint materials on them, such as WD2 and CT1. Or I can model it on top of the walls and have it all be a certain finish. All of this information, as you see on the bottom left-hand side, is live. That office view looking to the left and to the right is live, and I see the results immediately. Any changes to those finishes show up in my schedule, which you see on the bottom right. What's really nice about this is it's 100% accurate, and I never have to redraw anything. Next, let's talk about design options. Our design options in Revit are not for completely different designs. They're usually something that has designs within our, let's say, four walls. And it's great for exploring options of a particular area, such as furniture layouts or alternate floor plan areas. But typically it leaves the core and the shell alone. You can display desired options and incorporate other type of design options for different phases. In this case, you'll notice a simple version of design options might be just as simple as something is showing a conference room with configurable tables or one long conference table. Now this is just a super simple example, but the idea here is that we don't have to have a separate Revit file. These are called design options, and they can be as simple or as complicated as need be. Next, we have phasing. Phasing is built into every Revit project. What I mean that is that it follows a linear time, and modeled objects always have a phase that they're created and possibly a phase that they're demolished. You can increase that by looking at views and applying those phase filters on those parameters and on those views. By the way, annotations do not have phase filters, so when you're working in Revit, keep that in mind. Annotations basically live all the time. This is great for renovation and addition work, and also good for simple construction phasing. What does this actually look like in real world? Over on the left-hand side, you have prior construction. And in prior construction, this actually looks like existing. This is an existing building. Then we have demolition phase. I can simply click on these and click on the demolition hammer, and it'll show these objects in demo, and that'll be a separate floor plan. Then I can do another one that's for new construction. All three of these views live in one Revit project. So I know I went through a lot. this is basically a synopsis of some of the major things that I cover in the class. And you can see we try to cover a lot of things, and we'll go into deeper dives in the class as well. So we went through a lot. Now's your turn. If you have any questions, please feel free. There's a chat window. Go ahead and type your message, and I'll try to answer whatever questions I have. Also, don't forget to visit ASTI.com for upcoming webinars, events, and specials. So, Mark, I'll go ahead and see if there's any questions that come in, see if I can answer them.
Okay, we're just giving everybody a few minutes here, a few seconds to enter then. You can please enter your questions into the questions pane. By the way, good job, Rick. I know you covered a lot of information very quickly in that. I do have a question from John here. He was asking about the course that you had referred to. If you could, he asked if that was free to subscribers.
The course itself is not free. It's something that you have to pay for to sign up. There is something called CAD Learning. CAD Learning is kind of our version of YouTube, which YouTube has everything, right? From funny cats to stupid videos. This particular CAD Learning that we give to our clients for free gives you the ability to search for every flavor of Autodesk software to learn, and it's dedicated to all Autodesk software, and that part is free, but the classes themselves are not the Live Lab classes. But great question, thank you. Thank you, John.
Ooh, Jamie writes this long question here, and looks like a good one. Jamie writes, we use Revit for interior retail. The project files are very huge, easily into the 100 meg files. Any common errors that you have noticed? What have you noticed are typical file sizes for interior projects, i.e. 5,000 square feet interior projects? Good question, Jamie.
Yeah, great question. All right, so Jamie and everyone else that's on the call, so a 100 meg file really isn't unheard of. Really, with that type of square footage, I've easily seen a 100 meg file. If you get anything close to 300 megs, then you really have to start looking at splitting up your project in a way that doesn't bog your computer down. At 300, you're really pushing the file size. The way to limit this, one of the biggest things that I've seen that blows up file sizes or increases the file sizes is by bringing in AutoCAD files. When you bring in an AutoCAD file and do a partial explode or explode, they really tend to bloat your Revit projects. If there's no other way to basically bring in that CAD file, like I showed the core and shell, it's essential and critical, I can't stress enough, that you purge and audit and get that thing as minimal and clean as possible. That means flatten, get rid of all the extra layers, get rid of hatches, and basically run, purge, audit on that AutoCAD file. Also, when you're working in Revit, you want to make sure to look at not necessarily 3D'ing up everything, and that's one of the things that I talk about in my class is what things can be done in what's called 2.5D, and that's somewhere between a flat drawing and a Revit full 3D. And to kind of give you a sneak peek of that in essence is using generic models and symbolic lines to create smart floor plan and elevation views of objects, usually in rooms, especially when you're looking at rooms that have, like, let's say, several hundred rooms in a drawing. But hopefully, Jamie, that answers your question. But you definitely want to make sure if it starts getting over 200 or getting close to 300, you need to look at splitting up the project somehow.
And thank you, Jamie. We have a question here from Sarah. It looks like a good one. I currently don't use Revit, but I get my base plans from architects that do. How can I get a cleaner, more CAD-friendly version when they save down to AutoCAD for me?
Okay. Sarah, I have, if you Google Rick Kremer, that's R-I-C-K-K-R-E-M-E-R, Rick Kremer, Autodesk Screencast, one word, Screencast. There's these short videos that I put out there on how to do things, and I do about usually 1 or 2 a week. I have a short little 4-minute video that shows exactly how to clean AutoCAD files so that they're friendly, the Revit friendly to when you get them. So no matter what you get from your architects, you can always clean them. And usually architects, when they give you their AutoCAD files, they don't necessarily clean them. They don't clean them up as they should. So definitely take a look at that video. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Applied Software, and we might be able to help you.
Thank you, Sarah. Jamie has a follow-up question to his earlier question. We thought we could take Revit and export schedules to add data via Excel, i.e. cost. It seems we cannot do this without other add-in apps. Is this the case, or can Revit do this out of the box?
So it doesn't do it out of the box. You need an add-in, but that's what leads me into actually if you are a Applied Software customer, we have these Revit tools that are free, and one of those is to export Revit to your schedules into Excel, and then vice versa. You can take your Excel spreadsheet and then import that back into Revit, and it works back and forth seamlessly. And that's a free tool for those of you who are Applied Software customers. And again, reach out to us or your salesperson to find out how to get that tool, because I got to tell you, it's by far one of the best things that you can get for Revit.
Okay, just to add on it, so if you're Applied Software customer, feel free to reach out to your salesperson or Rick and I, and we will get you in touch with it to get those free add-in tools. A couple people have asked Rick that you repeat your website, so if you could repeat that again.
Absolutely. So if you just Google Rick Kremer, K-R-E-M-E-R, and then do Autodesk Screencast. That's Rick Kremer, Autodesk Screencast, S-C-R-E-E-N-C-A-S-T. When you do that, you'll see there's an area called the Autodesk Knowledge Base Network. Click on that and you'll see the videos that I have.
Great, thank you, Rick. We have a question here from Jody. When using an architectural linked base model, how can we host wall sweeps and light fixtures to the base model, or is this just a 2016 update? Thank you, Jody.
So that's a great thing. When you have an architectural base model that you bring in to your project, one of the things that you can do is do what's called a copy monitor. When you copy monitor those walls, they place a copy of those walls directly into your project, and then you can start to paint materials. So typically what I'll do is I'll create another wall type that is, let's say, 3/32 of an inch, and that will be my wall with some type of material on it. When I join that wall to the now monitored and copied wall from the ARC model, when I join those walls together, it'll actually cut openings for doors and windows in my new, let's say, 3/32 skin wall. When you do sweeps, you apply the sweep not to the host, but to actually your new 3/32 inch wall. And then any changes to that architect's base plan, when you receive it, since it's now copy monitored, you'll get a notification immediately when you open up that file if there's any changes.
Thank you, Rick. Jamie asked this question concerning the web pages that you mentioned. He says we have a similar issue to Sarah's. We export from Revit to CAD, and our architect is having issues with the quality size info. We export from Revit for their use for CAD. sorry if I slaughtered that question. So would have to talk to our marketing department if we can, when we send out, typically after the webinar, we send out a thank you or with a link to the YouTube channel where this video will be posted of this webinar. And I'm not sure if we can add it into that as far as that email with the link for that pages, but I will definitely check on that. We have another question also concerning marketing. Will Rick make the PowerPoint or PDF of this presentation for this class available? So again, I'm not sure how we would do that as far as making that PDF. Go ahead, Rick, if you have an answer.
Sorry. So I have an answer actually for Jamie's question as well as the new one. So Jamie, yes, we will actually add a link in that email to where you can find my my screencasts. And to answer the question in regards to the PowerPoint or the PDF, we don't present the PDF, but this whole webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it over and over and over again.
Thank you, Rick. Here we have a question. Amanda asked a question. I have a project that has about 300 plus rooms. Again, we do hotels. Should we model each of the rooms? And if so, wouldn't that make the model huge?
That's a great question. So basically that goes back to an earlier question that was posed, and those rooms, and I see this all the time with companies that are doing, let's say, hospitality or let's say dorm rooms. You create what's called the 2.5D detail, which uses a generic model and symbolic lines, and you'll get file sizes that are drastically smaller. Great question.
Stan asked this question, looks like a good one. Let me just make sure I read it correctly. Our in-house designer uses SketchUp. How can we integrate their drawings into our workflow?
Okay, SketchUp is used a lot by a lot of companies, and what's critical for those of you who are getting drawings from SketchUp, let's say your designer has SketchUp, I guess, then what you would want to do is export out a 2D AutoCAD, and that's only available in SketchUp Pro, but it's critical that you make your view basically straight on, not with parallax. I think they call it standard or something like that, that basically doesn't give you the perspective view. If you export out that elevation or floor plan in a perspective view, everything will be, it'll be wrong. So make sure to do it in a standard flat 2D non-perspective view, and that's only available in SketchUp Pro.
Thank you again, Stan, for that question. We do appreciate it. I got another question here. Materials are very important to us. Is there a way to create a central material library that we can pick from to use in our projects?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, materials are something that are brought into Revit and are the core of interior designers. Typically what I recommend firms to do is to create a material project, and that material project would have nothing but typically what I see is like 1 foot by 1 foot tiles, and each one of those tiles represent a material. Within Revit you can actually export those materials and bring them into another project simply by bringing over those project materials. It's actually something I teach in the class.
So Jamie, I love Jamie. Ask another question. I am trying to set up VR, virtual reality, presentations on Revit. One question, do I need an app to set up the presentation, or can I do this out of the box? And two, as for hardware, as far as viewers, is there a preferred device, Oculus, Google Glass, that works best with Revit and or external app to view the VR?
Yes, it works great out of the box. So when you first of all, you have to place the camera view. In a nutshell, you place the camera view, you name the camera view, right? And you send it to Revit to render in the cloud. When you render to the cloud, you then go to the cloud. You have the design option as a pull down to basically go through and re-render as a stereo panoramic. Doesn't cost you anything after the initial rendering. When you render it as a panoramic, you have the ability to just copy that out to a computer, and then on any computer you can basically use your mouse to look around a space. There's an option that'll show up in the bottom left-hand corner with a QR code. All you need is an iPhone or an Android phone and download a QR code reader. When you download that QR code reader, it'll pop up on your phone as an image, and then on the top or bottom left-hand corner you'll see these goggles. Click on that and it'll become now a stereo view. At that point, all the hardware and everything is now built into your phone. On Amazon, you can buy Google Cardboard glasses for $9 and drop them in and basically be able to look around a space in 3D. The more expensive models start around $30 all the way up to maybe $600 or more dollars, but you can spend about $25 and get the ones that you saw in the picture that I had that are plastic, and you just drop your phone in and they work great. I mean, if you are at the top echelon and have a budget, Oculus Rift has those, but those require a PC. The lower cheap version is basically using your phone for VR, and again, everything is built into Revit.
Again, thank you for the question. Stan has a follow-up question. We do a lot of quick hand sketches for ideas to present to the client. Can Revit help us in creating these?
Yes. So just like I showed on one of the presentations, you basically drop in your camera view, one of the display options that are on the bottom left-hand corner of your Revit. You can change the graphic display to be sketchy, and there's two sliders. One is how sketchy, and I tell people that's how much coffee you had as you're drawing the lines, and then the other one is how much overlap. What's really nice about this is that you can take any elevation, floor plan, or 3D view and create these sketched lines or sketchy look and then print them out and then literally doodle on top of them. And you give those to your design client, and they're blown away. And the fact is you're actually working on the Revit construction documents. Okay.
Stan, thank you for the question. And then see one more here. We typically receive an AutoCAD drawing from the architect. Do we need to model everything in their drawing in Revit, or, I'm sorry, let me read that again, model everything in their drawings in Revit in order to do our work?
So that was something that we talked about actually earlier, and no, you don't have to model everything. So don't feel overwhelmed when you receive those CAD files. And I think there was someone that talked about receiving those CAD files from an architect earlier. So you don't have to model everything. Matter of fact, you don't have to. The only thing that I would model is the work that we're responsible for in my ID sheets for those interior design layouts. Everything else can stay in AutoCAD flat 2D line work.